Noah's Ark mystery deepens. Underground tunnels in Turkey spark fresh debate. High in the rugged terrain of eastern Turkey, a long debated mystery has resurfaced with renewed intensity. At the center of it lies the intriguing Durupınar formation, a ship-shaped formation located near the towering Mount Ararat, a site many have linked to the biblical account of Noah's Ark. Now let's explore this story in detail and uncover the facts on our AI podcast.
Usually when you look at a mountain range, you expect, well, absolute chaos.
Right. Jagged peaks, random rock falls, that sort of thing.
Exactly. You just expect the messy, unpredictable result of tectonic plates crashing together millions of years ago.
Nature isn't really known for straight lines.
No, it's not. You definitely don't expect to be hiking at 6,000 feet and suddenly stumble across this massive, perfectly symmetrical shape that looks entirely engineered.
It breaks all the fundamental rules of what we expect from a rugged natural landscape.
It totally shatters those expectations. But high in the mountains of eastern Turkey, there is this specific geological anomaly that does exactly that. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking some brand new high-tech scans of the Durupınar Formation.
And this is a site that has fascinated people for decades.
Decades, yeah. And our mission today is to look at these new findings, which claim to have detected an internal structure that, that could point to the resting place of Noah's Ark.
Yep.
And we are going to weigh those extraordinary claims directly against the firm skepticism of mainstream science.
I love this topic because it captures such a fascinating tension. I mean, on one side, you have perhaps one of the most enduring famous legends in human history.
Oh, absolutely.
And then on the other side, you have ground-penetrating radar, you have soil chemistry analysis, hard geological data. It is literally the absolute collision of ancient texts and modern investigative technology.
It really is wild to think about. To understand why researchers are hauling thousands of dollars of advanced tech up a remote, freezing Turkish mountain, we first have to understand what drew their eyes to this specific patch of dirt in the first place,
The location itself is key.
Yeah. We're looking at a spot roughly 18 miles south of Mount Ararat.
Which is the highest peak in Turkey, just for context.
Right, exactly. And visually, if you look at aerial photos, the site is undeniably distinctly boat-shaped.
It's striking.
It really is. It looks exactly like the massive hull of a ship, just, seemingly petrified and resting right there in the earth.
But it's not just that general teardrop outline that has researchers spending decades up there, right? It's the math.
Yeah, the precise measurements. Okay, let's unpack this, because the numbers game here is what's really driving the excitement.
The dimensional data is the absolute anchor for this entire investigation.
For sure. Because in the book of Genesis, the text gives incredibly specific dimensions for the ark. It states the vessel was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high.
And when you convert those ancient cubits into modern measurements,
You get a structure that is approximately 515 feet long, 86 feet wide, and 52 feet tall.
which is massive.
It's huge. And researchers mapping the Durupınar Formation claim that the physical shape in the Earth aligns strikingly well with those exact proportions.
And if this formation were just, a vague oval depression in the ground, it would just be a local geological curiosity.
Right, just a weird rock.
Exactly. But the specific mathematical alignment elevates it to a full-blown mystery.
Think about the mathematical improbability of that for a second. I mean, it's one thing to look up at the sky, see a cloud shaped like a car, and just move on.
Because wind currents occasionally create familiar shapes, sure.
Yeah, pareidolia, right. But it's another thing entirely to walk into the dense woods completely at random and find a natural rock formation with the exact square footage, length, width, and height of a Honda Civic.
That's a great way to put it.
That precise numbers game is the engine behind all this relentless research.
And the sheer scale we were talking about makes those dimensions even more striking.
Yeah.
I mean, 515 feet, that is nearly 2 entire football fields in length.
Wow, yeah.
In a chaotic, mountainous environment shaped by random erosion, finding 3 distinct dimensional markers that correlate so closely with an ancient blueprint. Well, that's precisely why explorers refuse to let this site go.
But a boat shape on the surface is really only part of the puzzle. Looks can be incredibly deceiving, especially from up in the air. The real question driving this new research is, what is actually going on inside that shape, like underneath the soil?
Which brings us directly to the new data in our source material.
Yes. So there's this US-based research group called Noah's Ark Scans, led by a researcher named Andrew Jones, and they wanted to see inside the formation.
But they can't just start digging.
No, obviously not. They couldn't just bring in heavy machinery and start trenching into a protected mountain.
Bro.
So they brought in ground-penetrating radar, or GPR.
Which is standard non-destructive practice in modern archaeology.
Yeah, how does that actually work? Because it sounds like science fiction.
It kind of does. So GPR works by sending high-frequency electromagnetic pulses down into the Earth. As those radar waves travel downward, they eventually hit boundaries between different materials.
Okay.
If the dirt is completely uniform, the signal travels smoothly. But if those pulses hit something with a different density, like a sudden void or a really dense rock or, buried material, the signal bounces back to the surface.
So it's basically echolocation for dirt, essentially, yeah. By mapping exactly how long it takes for those signals to return, researchers can effectively draw a 3D map of what lies beneath the soil without turning over a single rock.
That is so cool. And according to Jones, the GPR scans they dragged across the site detected a vast network of corridors hidden just beneath the surface.
Corridors.
Yeah, he states these passageways don't just wander aimlessly. They apparently converge toward a large, hollow central chamber, which he specifically described as an, quote, atrium.
That's a very specific word to use.
It is. His argument is that these underground voids appear highly organized, which directly echoes the biblical description of the Ark having multiple distinct levels and internal rooms designed to house, Noah's family and the massive biological payload of animals.
Right, the pens and cages.
Exactly. Furthermore, another researcher on the team, William Crabtree, noted that their radar mapped one specific tunnel running from the pointed front of the formation directly toward the center.
And what's special about that one? He claims the dimensions of this passage look large enough for a human being to walk through.
Wow. Though it's definitely worth noting immediately that they haven't physically confirmed a direct entry point yet.
True.
The entire hypothesis of an internal structure is currently based solely on mapping the return times of those radar pulses.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting, because I have to push back a little on these conclusions based on the data.
Go for it.
GPR is an amazing tool, but at the end of the day, it's just showing us an absence of material. It shows us empty space. And empty space doesn't come with a label on it.
You didn't say hallway or animal pen.
Exactly. How on earth do we differentiate between a naturally occurring cavern carved out by, underground water erosion and a deliberately man-made corridor just from looking at an electromagnetic bounce?
I hear you. I do.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, GPR isn't just detecting random gaps in the dirt. It's mapping the actual geometry of those voids.
Okay, fair.
When a radar readout starts showing parallel lines, or symmetrical spacing, or 90-degree right angles, it is entirely fair for a researcher to suspect human intervention. Nature heavily favors curves, fractures, paths of least resistance.
It doesn't build square rooms.
It rarely builds in perfect grids. So when the team sees geometric organization in the data, that's what prompts that leap to describing it as a corridor.
But it's still a massive leap to call an empty geometric space an atrium.
It is, and what's fascinating here is that you've zeroed in on the exact limitation of the technology. GPR is invaluable for finding anomalies, but declaring that these voids are inherently organized for a specific purpose, that is still a subjective interpretation of raw data.
Right, because someone has to read the map.
Exactly. A radar map shows us contrasts and density. It takes a human mind looking at those contrasts to apply a narrative and say, that right there is a hallway. Moving water and shifting geological plates can absolutely create complex, organized-looking networks of caves that mimic structural design.
So the radar gives us the where, but it fundamentally cannot give us the what or the who.
Precisely.
But see, radar can only map the shape of a void. It can't tell us what used to occupy that space.
Right.
For that, researchers have to look for physical residue left behind in the dirt itself. And that leads us to the strange chemical footprints surrounding these voids.
A microevidence.
Yeah. During the 2024 investigations, the research team went around the site and collected 88 separate soil samples from both inside and outside the boat-shaped outline.
And soil chemistry is incredibly revealing. It's often the permanent fingerprint of ancient activity.
How so?
Well, when human beings build a massive structure, or when huge amounts of organic material gather and decompose in one concentrated area, it fundamentally alters the chemical makeup of the ground around it for millennia.
That makes total sense. And the lab results from those 88 samples showed unusually high potassium levels concentrated specifically within the formation.
Which is a huge detail.
Yeah, the research team claims this massive spike in potassium could specifically indicate the presence of large amounts of decomposed timber.
Wood.
Right, which makes sense. If you are actively hunting for a colossal wooden ship, an anomaly pointing to ancient wood is exactly what you are hoping to find.
It's the smoking gun they're looking for.
Exactly. They also theorize that the incredibly harsh climate at that altitude, the ground is essentially frozen solid for nearly half the year, might have acted like a cryogenic vault.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, helping preserve or petrify the underground materials rather than letting them just completely wash away over the centuries.
The mechanism behind that potassium spike is crucial to understand here.
Break that down for us.
When massive amounts of wood decay over time, particularly if they break down into ash, they produce a substance called potash.
Potash.
Right, and potash is incredibly rich in potassium salts. So if a gigantic wooden structure slowly rotted away in this specific footprint, a heavy, localized potassium signature is exactly what it would leave behind in the surrounding soil.
Wow.
And the freezing temperatures play a massive role, too. Extreme cold radically slows down biological decay. Under the right pressure and mineral conditions over thousands of years, wood trapped in freezing mud can petrify.
Turning to stone.
Literally turning to stone, yeah, while retaining its original shape and a portion of its chemical footprint.
And what's wild is that this altered soil chemistry isn't just showing up in laboratory test tubes. It is apparently visible to the naked eye right on the surface.
The grass.
Yes. The source material notes this bizarre vegetation anomaly. The grass growing inside the boundaries of the boat chase is reportedly a visibly different shade of green than the grass growing immediately outside the formation.
It's nature's neon sign.
Totally. Andrew Jones suggests that the altered soil chemistry from the decomposed material buried below is directly affecting the plant life growing above it.
Which is a known phenomenon.
Yeah, I think about it like an aerial view of a dry summer lawn. If you've ever flown over a drought-stricken area or just looked at one from a drone, you can sometimes see perfectly straight, bright green lines crisscrossing the brown grass where an old, buried house foundation used to be.
Oh, yeah.
The surface life is reacting to the hidden architecture underneath.
Exactly, and archaeologists actually rely on that exact phenomenon. They call them crop marks.
Crop marks, okay.
When a large structure is buried, it alters the depth of the topsoil and fundamentally changes how moisture is retained in the ground. Plants growing directly over a buried stone wall or a compacted floor will have shallower roots and less water, causing them to ripen or die off faster than the surrounding vegetation.
Makes sense.
Conversely, plants growing over a buried ditch or a nutrient-rich, decomposed void-like or potassium spike will grow taller and greener.
Wow.
Finding a massive crop mark in the precise shape of a ship's hull, perfectly corresponding with high localized potassium levels, undeniably adds a very compelling physical layer to the radar data.
It really does. So we have exact genesis dimensions, we have underground voids mapping out parallel corridors, we have high potassium levels pointing to ancient decomposed wood, and we have vegetation anomalies sketching out a hole on the surface.
It sounds incredibly cohesive.
It sounds like a slam dunk. But before we start completely reevaluating human history, we have to look at the counter evidence. And this is where we have to tread carefully.
Absolutely.
I want to be extremely clear to you, our listener, about our impartiality rule here on the deep dive. Looking at these source documents, it's our job to present both the high-tech anomalies and the very firm geological pushback without taking a side.
Right. We are not endorsing either narrative.
Exactly. If there's politically charged or religiously charged content, we don't take sides. We're here to look at the data, not to validate the legend or side with the skeptics. We're just conveying the ideas from the original source material.
And the scientific method demands objectivity.
Right. So what does the mainstream scientific community actually say about the Durupınar formation?
Well, the mainstream geological explanation for this site is incredibly robust. Many geologists firmly maintain that the Durupınar formation is entirely 100% natural.
A completely natural occurrence, just rocks and mud.
Yes. Geologists explain it as a textbook example of mudflow debris shaped over time by erosion and intense tectonic activity.
But what about the boat shape?
The fluid dynamics of a mudslide explain the shape perfectly. When a massive volume of mud and rocky debris flows down the side of a mountain and encounters a much harder stationary rock, outcropping, essentially acting like a bridge pier in a rushing river, the mud flow is forced to split.
Okay, I can picture that.
It flows around the hard rock on both sides and then merges back together downstream. This natural hydrodynamic process carves out a streamlined, teardrop, or boat-like shape in the landscape.
So it's just the natural physics of moving Earth?
Precisely. And crucially, the source article itself points out that despite decades of surface-level investigations, there is currently zero peer-reviewed archaeological evidence confirming the discovery of Noah's Ark or any man-made wooden vessel at this specific site.
None at all.
None.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, nature is fully capable of engineering what the source material aptly calls convincing coincidences.
Pareidolia is an incredibly powerful force here. As pattern-seeking animals, our brains are literally hardwired to find meaning, structure, and familiar shapes in random noise.
We want to see the boat.
We do. When a massive natural mud flow splits around a rock and creates a shape that roughly matches a boat, our minds desperately want to map ancient measurements onto it. It's a fundamental cognitive bias. We see the shape, we
Right.
measure it, and we force the data to fit the narrative we already know.
We work backwards.
Exactly. In rigorous science, an extraordinary claim like locating a legendary vessel that survived a planetary flood requires extraordinary, tangible, peer-reviewed evidence. Electromagnetic radar bounces and localized soil chemistry are fascinating starting points, but they are absolutely not conclusive proof of a ship.
So we find ourselves at this incredible gridlock. We have researchers looking at the data and seeing an ancient ship complete with an atrium, petrified timber, and animal rooms.
And we have geologists looking at the exact same site and seeing nothing more than a teardrop-shaped mud flow caused by simple erosion and rock outcroppings.
It's wild. So what will it actually take to finally settle the mystery? What is the next frontier for the Durupınar site?
The source material lays out a very clear, highly escalated roadmap for the research team's upcoming operations. They're preparing to move far beyond the non-invasive surface scans and topsoil tests.
Okay, what's next?
The next planned phase involves bringing in heavy equipment for core drilling directly into the formation.
Core drilling. Wow. That is a massive operational leap from, dragging a radar sled over the grass and scooping up dirt in a test tube.
It is a profound escalation. Core drilling involves driving a hollow steel tube deep into the earth to extract an intact cylinder of the subterranean layers.
So they're going right into the anomalies.
Yes. They plan to retrieve physical, internal samples straight from the depths where those radar bounces are located. And even more critically, once they drill those boreholes, they intend to lower specialized cameras directly into the detected voids.
Oh, to actually see it.
They want to visually map what they believe are the structural rooms and chambers.
So what does this all mean for you listening? It means we might actually be on the verge of a definitive answer. Think about the implications of that for a second. After literally decades of endless speculation, of people hiking up a freezing mountain with measuring tapes, arguing over complex radar charts, and debating soil chemistry, upcoming excavation seasons could finally, permanently prove if this site is just a fascinating natural geological anomaly or a massive historical artifact.
It's the moment of truth.
We are moving from theoretical data mapping to tangible, visual proof.
And regardless of what those cameras eventually show, I think this pursuit matters deeply to you and to all of us.
Why is that?
Because this deep dive isn't really just about analyzing a uniquely shaped mound of dirt in eastern Turkey. It's about how our deep intrinsic desire to understand our own origins drives us to continuously push the absolute boundaries of technology.
That's a great point.
We are literally inventing and deploying new ways to look deep into the earth because we are so fundamentally desperate to know where we came from and to figure out if the stories our ancestors passed down are actually rooted in physical truth. That drive to uncover the past is a universal human trait.
It really is. To wrap up our investigation today, we are looking at the ultimate tension. On one side, a legendary ship, potentially equipped with geometric corridors, a central atrium, and the chemical footprint of petrified wood, sitting silently high in the rugged mountains.
And on the other,
one of nature's most convincing, most flawlessly executed geological coincidences, shaped by nothing more than mud, flowing water, shifting tectonic plates, and thousands of years of time.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. Something that builds on everything we've unpacked today.
Let's hear it.
When they finally haul those drilling rigs up the mountain, when they punch through the bedrock and drop those cameras down into the pitch-black voids, what happens if the floodlights flick on and the monitors show absolutely nothing but natural water-carved stone?
Will people accept it?
Exactly. Will the mystery truly end, or will believers simply assume the Ark is buried somewhere else, perfectly intact, waiting to be found?
Probably the latter, honestly.
But conversely, imagine the monitor flickers to life, the feed clears, and the camera actually reveals a perfectly square, definitively petrified wooden beam.
Oh, man.
It forces us to ask a monumental question. What happens to our entire modern understanding of the world when hard, undeniable scientific data collides directly with our most deeply held ancient beliefs?
It changes everything, because suddenly you're not just looking at a mountain range expecting the random chaos of tectonic plates. You're looking at a world that was perfectly intentionally designed.
Okay, one question for you. If future drilling and camera exploration confirm man-made rooms inside the formation, would this become one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in human history and reshape beliefs worldwide? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.